Sophie had been denying herself everything for years just to take care of her disabled husband. But one day, Ethan forgot his phone in the kitchen. When Sophie accidentally played his voice message for his mother, she went pale at what she heard. Before we continue, let me know from which country you are watching this video, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel, because I share touching life stories here every day. Enjoy listening. Sophie could barely stand on her feet as she exited the cosmetics company building. The workday had completely drained her. Endless product inspections, new formulations, constant discussions with suppliers, all the responsibility rested solely on her shoulders, and this had become her normal. She trudged towards the bus stop, absent-mindedly counting down the days until payday. Her mind was full of familiar worries: the mortgage, their daughter, even. Sophie sighed heavily. Her husband, once a strong and cheerful man, had become just a shadow of his former self. After losing his job due to illness, the entire burden of the family fell on her. At first, she believed it was temporary. She had hoped that Ethan would find a way to get involved in something again. But year after year, nothing changed. When she finally reached home, she slowly climbed up the stairs and opened the door. The apartment was quiet. Ethan, as usual, was lying on the couch staring blankly at the TV. "Hi," she said while taking off her coat. "Yeah," he muttered without even looking at her. Just another evening, like always, Sophie thought bitterly. She put the kettle on and began reminiscing. Ethan hadn't always been like this. He started working right after high school because he didn't want to waste time studying. He went to vocational school, got his driver's license, and started working at the city bus depot. He enjoyed the job: new roads, changing scenery, and visiting new cities. But over the years, his body couldn't take the stress. Years of sitting, constant vibrations, bad eating habits, and chronic fatigue took their toll. At age 38, he was hospitalized with severe back pain. Later came heart problems. Doctors strongly advised him to change jobs, but Ethan was stubborn. Soon, he could barely move without pain. That's when his mother, Gloria, who held a high position in a social support fund, arranged for him to receive disability benefits. Sophie accepted this as inevitable. She truly believed Ethan couldn't work anymore. He constantly complained about pain when sitting, walking, or even standing. From that moment, she took on everything: bills, groceries, medicines, the mortgage. Gloria, however, never appreciated Sophie's sacrifices. "You don't take care of Ethan well enough," Gloria would say at every opportunity. "He needs support and attention." Sophie didn't argue, but deep down she was exhausted. She worked every day, paid for everything, and yet all Ethan did was complain. To his mother, that didn't matter. "Do you know how hard it is for him emotionally?" Gloria often reminded her. "You should cook more delicious meals for him instead of these simple dinners." Sophie clenched her teeth. Did Gloria really think she had time for fancy dinners after exhausting workdays? After Ethan received disability status, he completely gave up. He didn't even try to find remote work. The only thing he did was go for short walks once a day, as prescribed by the doctor, and then return to his usual spot on the couch in front of the TV. Sophie got used to survival mode. Every day was the same: wake up early, go to work, come home to endless chores. A few years ago, her colleague Victor once said something that stayed with her. At the production plant, the supervisor, Mr. Peterson, began talking about corporate trips to health resorts, which were offered once a year to the best employees. "Sophie, you really need to take a break. Your results are always excellent. Take this opportunity for yourself," he said, handing her a document with a list of available resorts. Sophie glanced briefly at the papers but immediately returned them. Vacation felt like something distant and unrealistic to her. She simply couldn't afford to relax, not when Ethan, who couldn't manage without her, was waiting at home. But then a different idea crossed her mind. Could this voucher be arranged for my husband instead? She asked carefully. Victor Peterson raised his eyebrows in surprise but nodded. Sophie explained that Ethan had serious health problems and that the resort might help him recover. Thus began a tradition. Almost every year, she asked to send Ethan to the resort instead of herself. He would leave for treatment, and deep down Sophie hoped it would help him, that after such trips, he would feel better and perhaps find at least a small job. But each time he returned, the same story repeated itself. Ethan grumbled that the resort was a waste of time, that nothing helped, and that the doctors could do nothing. He would lie back on the couch, complain about life, and once again become completely dependent on her. Yet Sophie continued to hope. One working day, Victor Peterson called Sophie into his office. He was in a cheerful mood and immediately shared good news. "There is a wonderful opportunity for you," he said. "A business trip to Paris for several months at one of the leading cosmetic factories. Fully paid accommodation, a good salary. And best of all, you can take your daughter, Emma, with you and enroll her in the school at the embassy." Sophie listened silently, but instead of joy, anxiety began to rise inside her. She knew this was the chance any specialist in her field would dream of. Paris meant new horizons, new prospects, and the possibility of a whole new life. But Ethan immediately came to her mind. He couldn't cope without her. He didn't work. He couldn't even buy groceries on his own. Who would take care of him? The answer was obvious. Sophie turned down the offer. And as soon as she did, a heavy feeling pressed down on her heart. She knew she had done what seemed right, but it brought no relief. She left the office and lingered by the window, gazing at the gray, cloud-covered city. Somewhere out there, a different world and new opportunities were waiting. But not for her. Responsibility held her back. She couldn't abandon Ethan. She simply couldn't. But one day, Sophie's life turned upside down. She returned home in the middle of the day. Sophie had just taken off her coat when Ethan peeked out of the room. "The courier's here," brought Emma's headphones. "He's waiting downstairs," he said casually. Sophie nodded automatically, but Ethan was already putting on his jacket. "I'll go myself," he said and headed to the elevator. Sophie went to the kitchen. A mountain of dirty dishes waited for her. Emma had rushed off to school that morning, and Ethan had obviously eaten lunch but, of course, hadn't cleaned up after himself. Sophie grabbed the sponge and turned on the faucet. The water pressure was too strong, and droplets splashed everywhere. A few landed on Ethan's phone, which was lying next to the sink. The touchscreen reacted. Suddenly, the phone vibrated. A voice message from Gloria appeared on the screen. Sophie hadn't intended to listen, but it played automatically. "Where are you rushing to? I really don't like this idea of Svetlana moving into your home. No, I really don't like it. You should understand, this is serious," Gloria's voice said firmly. Sophie froze. Svetlana? Who was Svetlana? Her heart started pounding. Her fingers trembled over the soapy water. Slowly, she turned her head toward the phone. 2 days ago, it had been Ethan's birthday, and she had given him this new smartphone. If she remembered correctly, he didn't even set up a lock code yet. Her hand reached for the phone. She opened the Messenger app and began scrolling through the conversation. She started listening to the previous messages. The message was from Ethan himself, recorded earlier that morning. "Mom, Claire is such a wonderful girl. I've completely fallen for her. I want her to live with me. I've already planned everything. Sophie told me she refused the trip to Paris, but I'll do everything to convince her. This is our chance, her push to succeed in her career. In the end, she'll even thank me for encouraging her to think about herself for once and not just about me all the time." Sophie sat on a stool, feeling her fingers grow cold. The next message was from Gloria. "Ethan, you know very well how much I despise your dear wife. But you must understand, if Sophie finds out you brought another woman into your home while she's away, you're done." Then came Ethan's voice again. "Mom, why are you always so dramatic? We don't even talk to the neighbors. We'll just live quietly here, and Sophie will send us money from France. Well, for me and Claire, of course. Honestly, it's like fate or something," he added with a laugh. Sophie shivered in horror. Another voice message followed, this time from Gloria again. Are you stupid? You can't hide something like this forever. When Sophie finds out, you'll be left with nothing. Do you really think they'll renew your disability next year? That's not guaranteed, and I might not be able to pull the strings again. Sophie still believes you're truly disabled. Thanks to me, you've been getting away with this without working. Then Ethan's voice again, confidently and coldly. Well, who cares if she finds out? I'll take half the apartment from her in the divorce, and then I'll demand alimony. I'm officially disabled, right? Let her work more. She'll have to support both our daughter and me with Claire. His voice sounded so casual, so calculating, as if this was nothing more than a routine plan, not the destruction of their family. The last message was the same one Sophie had accidentally heard earlier. Sophie leaned back, feeling like the ground was crumbling beneath her. Everything she believed in had collapsed in mere minutes. She walked out of the kitchen, not even noticing how her hands were shaking. Her whole life suddenly felt like one giant lie. She had thought Ethan couldn't work, but he simply didn't want to. She believed he appreciated her support, but he only wanted to get rid of her and leave her drowning in debt. She believed they were a family, but in reality, she was just a cash cow for them. Her chest tightened painfully. Without thinking, she grabbed the phone and rushed out of the apartment. Running down the stairs, she found Victor Peterson's number in her contacts and pressed call with trembling fingers. Sophie? Is everything all right? Victor's voice was full of concern. She took a deep breath. I accept, she whispered. I'm going to Paris. Glad to hear it. No more questions. We'll start the paperwork tomorrow, he replied firmly. Sophie hung up and felt something inside her shift. She would no longer sacrifice herself. France became her new home. Working at the cosmetic company inspired her, and new opportunities kept opening up. Her daughter, Emma, quickly adapted to the embassy school, made friends, and was happy again. And beside Sophie was Victor, kind and respectful. Over time, she saw in him not just a boss, but a man who truly understood and supported her. 2 months after the move, Victor proposed. But there was still one unfinished matter. Through her lawyer, Sophie filed for divorce. As expected, Ethan tried to fight back, demanding his share of the apartment and claiming he was disabled and couldn't be left homeless. But his confidence disappeared the moment the lawyer politely mentioned that during court proceedings, Ethan's disability status could be scrutinized for fraud. Ethan still resisted, but Gloria understood the danger first. She knew that if an investigation began, it could end very badly for both of them. Sign it, unless you want us both to end up in prison, Gloria hissed, clenching her teeth. Under pressure, Ethan gave in. The court ruled in Sophie's favor. The evidence that all the mortgage payments over the years had been made solely by Sophie proved decisive. The court ordered Ethan to cover the remaining debt. After all, if he wanted his share of the apartment, he would also have to take responsibility for the obligations. When the apartment was put up for sale, Ethan held on to hope until the very end. He thought that after splitting the money, he would have enough left for a fresh start. But when everything was settled, he was stunned to realize that almost his entire share had gone toward repaying the bank loan. Sophie returned to France, while Ethan was left with nothing. He couldn't comprehend how everything had collapsed so quickly. Not long ago, he had a warm home, a wife who cared for him, and confidence in the future. Now, he stood at his mother's door holding a pitiful suitcase of belongings. Gloria opened the door, looked him up and down coldly, and then silently turned and walked deeper into the apartment. Mom, I have nowhere to live, he muttered, stepping inside hesitantly. That's your problem, she snapped, switching on the TV. I thought you'd help me, he said weakly. I already did. Her voice was icy and distant. You ruined everything. Ethan slowly sank onto a chair, burying his head in his hands as his ears rang. Once, he had been the man of the house, his mother's pride and joy. She had helped him build his life, plan for the future, and achieve his goals. Now, he was a burden even to her. He had no job, no money. Eventually, he took a job at a construction site. Heavy physical labor he once despised. Now his health really deteriorated. His back pain became unbearable. But he couldn't stop. He had to work or he would starve. Each evening he returned to a tiny room in his mother's apartment. She no longer cooked for him. They barely spoke. He was no longer her pride. Meanwhile, Sophie was finally living her new life. When she returned to Paris, she was still emotionally drained. But day by day, the past released its hold on her. For the first time in many years, she didn't have to care for someone else. Victor was always by her side, calm, attentive, and reliable. He never pushed her, never rushed her. He simply stood beside her quietly. He invited her on evening walks through the charming streets of Paris. He showed her cozy cafes where they served hot chocolate with vanilla. With him, everything felt easy, something Sophie never thought possible. In the past, she didn't believe in miracles. She didn't believe one could start over. But now, looking into Victor's eyes, she knew with certainty she had finally made the right choice.
And what about you? What would you have done in Sophie's place? Write your opinion in the comments below. Your thoughts matter to us. Thank you for listening. See you tomorrow.